The following program will make you want to grow things and experience new and wonderful dreams about your plants, garden, and garden design. Listener participation is always strongly advised. Good evening and welcome to Down the Garden Path with your hosts, Joanne Shaw and Matthew Dressing, right here on Reality Radio 101. To get on board live this evening, send us an email. Our email address is instudio101@gmail.com. And now, right to your hosts of Down the Garden Path, Joanne Shaw and Matthew Dressing.
Thank you, and welcome everyone to this episode of Down the Garden Path, where each week we discuss down-to-earth tips and advice for your plants, gardens, and landscapes. As landscape designers and gardeners, we think it is possible and important to have great gardens that are low maintenance, and we want to help you make it happen. I'm Joanne Shaw, landscape designer and owner of Down to Earth Landscape Design for the past 11 years. It is currently a design-only business here east of the GTA. With me is my co-host, Matthew Dressing. Welcome, Matthew.
Good evening, Joanne. Hello, Gary. I am Matthew Dressing, a horticulturist and landscape designer.
You're late.
And you are here.
I'm here, just under the wire.
Yeah.
And owner of Natural Affinity Designs. And Natural Affinity is a landscape design and garden maintenance firm servicing Toronto and the eastern GTA. Joanne and I enjoy doing Down the Garden Path, each week bringing you interesting, relevant, and helpful topics to help you achieve a great garden. We learn right along with you, from each other, from our research, and from the guests that join us here on the show, like tonight. And as always, we welcome your questions via social media and emails.
That's right. See, and you guys, aren't you glad we don't have video, right? We can sneak in right at the last second because there's no video. We want to thank you always for joining us here on Down the Garden Path, live on the air, but we also want you to check out past shows on the Down the Garden Path podcast that will be released later this week. So, and all of our past shows are there, so please check it out on your favorite podcast app, and while you're there, don't forget to subscribe to be notified of new content, and please like and share and leave us a comment. So thank you.
That's right. So tonight,
That's right, tonight.
What are we talking about? Well,
We're excited to have a guest.
we are.
Yes.
We are indeed. And we're going to talk with our guest, Sean James, of Sean James Consulting, about trees. They provide us a lot, very, very much, actually. Clean air, provide us with shade, provide food, act as a habitat to wildlife. But amidst all this, whether you're a homeowner or landscaper, there can still be some debate about how to properly plant a tree. So, with some time left in the season to plant a tree in our own yard, like I said, we're joined by Sean James of Sean James Consulting and Design, and we're going to take a closer look at the newly published Ontario Landscaping Tree Planting Guide.
Excellent.
So, if you want to join the conversation, if you have some questions about planting some trees, or for Sean specifically, you can always write us here at instudio101@gmail.com. And you can reach Joanne and I always at joanne@down2earth.ca and Matthew at naturalaffinitydesigns.ca.
Excellent. And I'll just tell everybody a little bit about Sean. So Sean was named GardenMaking magazine as one of the 20 making a difference. Excellent. Gardening has been Sean James's hobby and profession for over 35 years. A graduate of Niagara Park's School of Horticulture, a master gardener, writer, and teacher, Sean focuses on eco-gardening techniques, which makes sense since he grew up surrounded by nature near Crawford Lake in Campbellville. He has spoken from the Maritimes to Seattle and landscaped from Nova Scotia to California. He sits on several environmental committees and has appeared on many television and radio shows. Sean owns Sean James Consulting and Design. Welcome to the show, Sean.
Hey, how you doing today?
Good, thank you. Thank you for joining us.
Absolutely. I got my voting out of the way, so I'm good now.
Yes, hopefully everybody in Canada has gotten their voting done and
right after the show.
Oh, Matt's going to do it right after the show. Yes. That's not why you were late.
No.
That's okay. That's all right. We're good to go. So, Sean, I know as soon as you had published on or put a notice a few weeks ago, or maybe even a month ago now on Instagram about this new Ontario tree planting guide, I kind of connected and said, I think that'd be a great topic. And you agreed. So thank you for joining us.
You're very welcome. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to get the word out because it's super important.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a number one, I have that every contractor seems to have their own idea on how to plant a tree. We've had arborists in here that given us, sometimes conflicting advice on how to plant a tree. And so I think a lot, why don't you tell us how this kind of came about and everything that went into it?
Yeah, well, you know what? It's interesting. You talk about all the debate about it. Landscape Ontario, which is our provincial trade group, hired Vineland Research and Innovation and Darby McGrath and her team to put together the best science, the most up-to-date science on how to properly plant trees so that we could debunk all of the myths that were out there, the misinformation. And they had a team of, we had a committee, Ian Bruce, Paul DeGroot, of course, Tony DiGiovanni, who's amazing, the head of Landscape Ontario, Glenn Loomis, Kevin Sheik, and Paul Wisniewski. I'm probably butchering that name anyway. I'm good with plant names. That's my strength.
That's right.
And yeah, we sort of teamed up and put together all of this new information. So it's interesting that the general citizenry often talks about mulch volcanoes and how bad they are, but
right.
A lot of landscapers were still doing them.
Mm-hmm.
You'd see trees all the time dying when the wire and the hose that was staking them up would
mm-hmm.
strangle the
yep.
tree. So this new guide is free to everyone. All they have to do is search Ontario Landscape Tree Planting Guide, and they can find this and all the diagrams in it, which I was lucky enough to be able to create for it. And all of the science is there. If you want to know the deep end of the pool, it's there. If you want to just know how to plant a tree, there's a diagram that'll show you how to do it. And there's a lot of things that we've been doing wrong over the years. One of the big things is planting trees too deeply. They come in the pot or in the ball and burlap, often a little bit too deep to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things we want people doing is to gently excavate down until you find where the trunk flares out to the roots.
Okay.
And that becomes the top of the soil, what we consider the top of the root ball. So once that's done, then you would measure the depth of the root ball, dig your hole to that depth. And if it's in clay soil, then you dig it a little bit more shallow so that it sits a tiny bit higher, just a few inches. And then that's where your root ball goes. And many people, up until very recently, were talking about amending the soil.
Oh, I was just going to ask you about that. That's the first thing that popped to my mind when you said clay. I was like, okay, but aren't we going to amend it?
No, because what it turns out that when you amend the soil, you create this wonderful little environment that the tree roots don't leave. So for the first couple of years, yay, fantastic, wow, look at it go. And then the tree roots just sort of go in circles in there, and they don't expand out into the surrounding environment, and the tree slowly starts to suffer. So not amending the soil is now the way to go. If you have to stake the tree, if it's windy, if the trees are really big, then you might need to stake the tree. But if you don't, which is fairly new too.
Yeah.
And if you're going to stake it, you put your stakes in perpendicular to the prevailing wind. Some of us have debated about that for years. So perpendicular to the prevailing wind, you stake it low, like you tie it low, maybe, so you've got your trunk of the tree and then the canopy of the tree, maybe halfway up that trunk, or maybe 2/3 of the way, and then you use a biodegradable tie, like rolled up burlap, or I use black denim. I go to the local fabric land or whatever, and I get a bolt of denim,
Okay.
and then I cut that in 2-inch strips, and I tie it with that, so that within 2 years, it's going to rot off. So you don't have to worry about going back and taking off the old wire and hose that people used to use.
Wow.
The thing is that we want the tree to move a bit. When I was a kid, if you broke a bone, they would cast it tight. And now they cast it loose because we realized that the bone will knit stronger. The same is true of the tree. If the wind can push on it, it can move back and forth a bit, the trunk will form stronger. It gets what we call a better taper. So these are all new bits of information that are really good to get out to the general public. Also, you dig your hole at least twice as wide, 2 to 3 times as wide as the root ball. So you're breaking up that soil, and then when you put it back in, sort of chopping it up and making it nice and loose, then the tree roots can easily move from whatever the root ball is out into the surrounding environment. So that's kind of, for a dork like me, it's pretty exciting stuff.
That's very exciting stuff. Yes, I love all that kind of stuff too, Sean.
It's wonderful. I mean, there's a lot of people out there. You went through the wonderful list of what trees do for us. I think gardeners in general, professionals and Joe and Josephine citizen, I think we deserve capes. We do so much for the environment. People don't realize that we're the people who can fix everything. We're the people who can fix the soil, the people who can plant trees that sequester carbon, the people who can save the bees and the monarchs and all of biodiversity. Even if you're properly landscaping, even street crime goes around down in your neighborhood, which is amazing when you think about it.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Yeah, landscaping does have a big impact. It really does.
And then, a lot of people think that we're just wheelbarrow pushers, but the amount of knowledge that goes into creating a proper design and a proper installation and proper maintenance.
Right.
There's a lot of people think they can prune. And sorry, guys in the audience, but a lot of us, you give us a power tool and we're off to the races, and we can do a lot of damage quickly.
Right.
Proper pruning is a wonderful thing. It makes a beautiful tree that can live a long time. But poor pruning, better no pruning than poor pruning.
Yes. Yes.
There's a lot. I want to get to a time when people go, well, landscapers' orders, just like they do doctors' orders, because if we're doing our job, if we're learning, if we're improving our knowledge, then we know an awful lot. It's not just the basic labor stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that could be a whole other show, right? Talking about the importance of the design and why you need to start with a plan, right? We can come back anytime. We can talk about that one for sure. Or maybe even at the end of the show, we can touch on that a bit. So I just want to get back to the amending, like the soil. So if we... because as a designer, you got the guy who's working for the landscaper and he's in the crew and they give me a guy to plant the tree. I place the plants and they're going to plant it for me. But, trying to convince them that they need to plant it the way I'm telling them is
well, that's the thing, right? Now you've got a document that you can refer people to.
Right.
And if they want to know the science, why do I have to do this? Well, read the guide. Or if they just want to know how, then there's all these, there's 9 different diagrams that show you, here's a ball and burlap tree in good soil, well-draining soil. Here it is in poor-draining soil.
Okay.
Here is a pot-grown tree. And now they're recommending, and some of this is kind of tough to wrap your head around. Now they're recommending, if it's pot-grown, and you can see a lot of roots going around and around the outside, actually shaving off the outside edge of those roots. And that doesn't set the tree back. I'm not going to lie, it probably slows it down a little bit. But then after that, those roots have good growth points to grow out into the landscape. It'll heal that really quickly, and then those roots will go out instead of just continuing in a circle. Because as they age, as you know, they can girdle the tree, they can strangle the tree.
Right.
So that's really important as well. And mulch is important, but not too much.
Right.
Just about a few centimeters out from the trunk. 2 inches, no more, and that you take out to the drip line of the tree. And one of the things that a lot of us are doing now is creating a little sort of saucer around the tree, and that's dictated in the guide as well. As deep as you want to go, the information is there.
Yes.
But if you just need to know how to plant a tree, you got to say a bare root tree, so a tree with no earth on the roots. it tells you how to plant those as well. It tells you how to plant a tree that needs guy wiring, where, say, a big pine tree, for instance, you have to have 3 ties, but they're down on an angle into the ground. So it shows you how to plant that as well.
Oh,
so
okay.
everything is there.
Okay. We actually
It's really exciting, and it's free.
Yeah, and it's free. That's the thing. We should let everybody know that this tree planting guide is free.
Yep.
We do have a question from one of our listeners. Ruth has written in. She says, "Hello, Joanne and Matthew. What a great topic tonight. My question for your guest is, what is the best way to plant a seedling or I'm assuming she's saying sapling, like so maybe a young tree. Thank you, Ruth from Toronto."
Sure. Yeah. Well, absolutely. The important thing is where the trunk meets the roots.
Okay.
Okay. We have this almost an epidemic in our industry where, and in general, where we're planting things just a little bit too deep, and the trunk, the bark of the trunk, is not designed to resist rot. So it needs to be at and above soil level. So you find where the trunk flares out into the roots. We call it the root flare appropriately. And that's what you want to have in well-draining soil, right at soil level. And if it's in clay soil, if it was a sapling, I'd probably only bring it up just a few inches, like maybe 3 inches. Now, it doesn't have to be in a mound, just a little bit higher than the surrounding soil. So you would build up to that, so it's at just a bit higher than the surrounding clay. That way it breathes. Roots breathe, and we forget about that. The symptoms of overwatering or sitting in water are the same as being dry. So you see a tree with the roots, the leaves starting to wilt, and we run out in water, and in some cases that's the worst thing you can do. So you want to have it sitting a little high. If you dig a hole in clay, it'll fill with water and stay that way. Interestingly, in clay soil, and that's, I mean, one of the things, finish your thought, Sean. If it's in clay soil, you need to scrape up the edges. When we run a shovel into clay soil, we almost glaze the side of it. We almost make it shiny, and then tree roots can't penetrate it. So you want to scuff up the edges of the hole a little bit in clay soil.
Okay.
One of the neat things about the guide, and to answer Ruth's question specifically, it's difficult because it depends on the seedling and the soil. So the guide matches trees to soil types. So there's lists of plants and lists of considerations for certain situations. So the first thing you're going to do really is look at the situation, look at the soil, look at the wind exposure, and then pick the tree that's going to suit that site best. So for so many years, we've tried to decide what tree or what plant or perennial, whatever we want, and then amend the soil, amend the situation to grow the plant.
Yes.
And this works
all the same way, right? Yeah. Like all the same amendment, right? Like the triple mix and the root rescue and all the different things.
Yeah, and I if you make the environment good, so if you make the soil by putting mulch on top, not only does it keep water in and keep weeds down, but you're almost inoculating the soil with all of the things that it needs to grow well. All the little creepy crawlies, the bacteria, the viruses, everything that lives in the soil. A bit of a sidebar would be that there are studies showing that if we treat the soil right, if we steward the soil properly, that can turn around climate change in just a very few years. So it's the same with the tree. If you treat the soil right, and if you give the soil the tools, the life to succeed, there are bacteria that nibble away at the rocks and release nutrients. There are fungi that nibble away at the rocks and release nutrients. They use acids and bases to dissolve the rock, and that makes the nutrients available to the tree. So you pick the right tree for the soil. So you might pick, if you need something bulletproof, you might plant one of the new hybrid elms or a hackberry or a bur oak or maybe a Freeman maple. You wouldn't plant, if it was really tough soil, you wouldn't plant a white pine. It likes good soil. Although one of the important things about Ruth's question, I really like about Ruth's question, is that planting a sapling and planting a seedling is much better in the long run because it's going to establish better. It's going to get its roots, just like if a child gets injured, it heals faster than I do, and I heal faster than my dad. A sapling or a seedling is going to adapt better to the local soil conditions.
Okay.
Right?
So when we've dug the hole, so you're saying we don't need to, like, so we're just going to dig out the hole, and then all that same soil that we've dug out, we're putting back in. We're not, we don't want to add, you don't want us to add any triple mix or anything? Nothing.
The soil that came out is the soil that goes in.
Okay.
Yeah,
now what
I would chop it up a fair bit. If it's clay, try and make it crumbly.
Okay.
Small pieces.
Okay.
But yeah, the stuff that came out is the stuff that goes back in, which is kind of tough to get over once you've spent a lifetime used to all the instructions that said amend the soil. But it's not a long-term success when we do that.
Okay. Now, what about even sandy? So clay is one extreme, and then you've got the other extreme of sandy soil.
Right. So if you're picking the right plant,
okay.
A lot of people think that they've got the worst soil in the world, hen to the head, oh, woe is me. But if you go to High Park in Toronto, which is pure sand, there are all kinds of really cool plants that grow there, like black oak and sassafras, that love sandy soil. If you go to Oakville, for instance, well, a lot of places around the lake, that's a really heavy clay, there are plants that grow there in that soil, like bur oak, like white spruce. That would be a better plant for a heavy clay. And of course, I tend to focus on the natives. I'm not stuck on that as long as we're not using invasive species like Norway maple.
Correct. Yeah.
But picking the right plant for the soil is the trick. There's no bad soil. I've got sandy soil, so there's all sorts of things that love sandy soil, all the native grasses and so on. But there's lots of plants, lots of trees that will do really well in sandy soil. But during the establishment process, during that first year, it's more important to really look after the plant as far as watering goes. Neither over nor under. And unfortunately, the only way to tell, unless you have a water measuring tool like a hydrometer, is to stick your finger in the dirt. If it's cool and moist, come back in a few days.
Right.
If it's warm and dry, then it needs a drink. And it needs a good slow drink, a good deep drink. We tend to, you walk out with the hose and stand there for a couple of minutes, and my job is done here.
Yes.
And it doesn't give the plant a good deep drink. You want to water once a week deeply instead of, every day sort of deal.
Oh, perfect. Well, we actually have a guest who Alice just wrote in, and you've just answered her question before you heard it, because Alice has said, hello, a question for your guest. How much water does new tree plantings need? Thanks.
And there are wonderful tools like
the tree bag.
Commercial names, but like gator bags.
Gator bags, yes. We talk about them a lot on the show. I love the gator bags.
As you should. They're brilliant.
They're brilliant.
They give the plant the right water, and they slowly release it.
That's
I'm a
right.
big fan.
Yes, don't you wish we kind of invented those? Yes, I do every day. But yeah, so Alice, if you're not familiar, it's Tree Gator is one brand, but it's a bag, and in some municipalities you can drive around, you'll see all these bags, green bags at the base of trees, and they're just filled with, they kind of zip up around the tree and filled with covered in teeny tiny holes, so that when the bag is filled with water, they release the water really slowly. Could take 8-9 hours or so, right, to slowly and therefore deeply water the tree.
That's the trick. That's always the trick. That's super, super important.
Yeah, definitely. And like you mentioned earlier, the challenge with trees as well as many shrubs and plants is when you look at a plant, it's hard to tell whether it's being overwatered or underwatered. The symptoms can be the same. So like you said, if you're not sure, to dig a little hole and to kind of investigate and make sure that the water is there's not too much water getting down there.
It's true. I think a lot about this. Again, going back to the small trees thing, I love planting small trees. I've planted the smallest tree which my back can lift, which isn't a lot, and I've planted the biggest tree that my burly guys can lift, and like kitchen table size. And 10 years later, the little guy is as big as the big guy, but better formed with a better root system. It's going to live 200-300 years, depending on species, and the other guy is going to die in a few decades, because let's take 2/3 of your circulatory system out and move you across town and see how well you do. Smaller is better.
Okay.
I'm not a fan of the biggest tree money can buy. Okay. And you got to remember, trees are, maybe if I'm really generous, half for you, and half for those who come after us.
Yeah, for
Trees
sure.
are something we do for the future.
Yeah, and so what size are you saying? Like just to do container size?
In my perfect world, something that you can move by hand
Okay.
is a better plan. Now, that's not part of the guide.
Right.
You're getting my opinion,
Okay.
not the guide's opinion. But the smaller plants establish better.
Okay. That's good to know. In your experience, right? In your very qualified experience.
I've been doing this for longer than most of my career's been alive.
Yeah.
So, Sean, we have another question. Tom writes in, "Hi, just wanted to say that I love the landscape at Victoria Park in Niagara Falls, Ontario. And does Sean have anything to do with that now?"
Where?
At Victoria Park in Niagara Falls.
Oh, no, sadly, no. That Victoria Park is remarkable. That actually, from a historical point of view, Victoria Park is especially remarkable because, if memory serves, that was all financed during the Depression by Sir Harry Oakes to keep people. Sir Harry Oakes was the wealthiest man in the world at the time. He lived in Niagara Falls, and to keep people employed during the Depression, all of those gardens in that area were built. And I hope I'm right saying that, but sadly that's not me.
Okay.
There are lots of trees around that I've planted, and I'm fond of saying that I'm not particularly looking forward to age, but I am looking forward to being 80 and driving around in my hover car and looking at all the trees that I planted. Because it really is something that lasts, that endures.
Yeah, that's great. Yes, and you have planted and done. I know you've focused on rain gardens as well. So I know you've had several communities
Absolutely.
You've touched on
and
those
there's some
too.
good trees. You've touched on a really neat thing. Sorry I leap around.
That's okay.
I do a lot of rain gardens. If you have a wet area in your backyard, there are trees that are perfect for that. Birch trees, willow trees, larch is perfect for that. One of my new favorites is sycamore.
Ooh,
a beautiful plant for the bottomlands. You see them growing on floodplains, and they just loft over the surrounding landscape with this pure white bark at the top of the tree. They're just a gorgeous, gorgeous plant, and another lovely native that's underused in general.
Doesn't that one have
swamp white oak and tin oak?
Does the sycamore have the camouflage bark? Is there a variety?
To a degree, not as much as London Plain.
Okay, so London Plain does.
There's
Okay.
transition zone that the answer is yes. There,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, that's right.
And the London Plain and even a non-native Dawn redwood might have been native here once upon a time when the dinosaurs roamed, but it's a good plant for rain gardens as well, as is a really nifty plant called bald cypress, which again used to be native here but was pushed back by the glaciers and never returned.
Okay. Excellent. So that is good. So there's some great tree options for wet areas. Birch trees, I think, people don't realize that birch like it wet. Willows, of course, everybody know. Most people know that willows do love it. Love the
and red and silver maple too.
Silver maple
and Freeman maple, which is a natural cross between red and silver.
Okay.
There's so many options, and we get stuck in using the same things over and over again.
And
it's such an opportunity lost because there's some really cool plants out there.
Yes, but that becomes a challenge as a designer, right? That you kind of get stuck, and you're like, you have your go-to list.
Well, it happens to all of us, yeah. But the thing that we got to remember is that variety equals resilience. I was at a place today, and the original landscape architect planted maybe 20 or 30 columnar pear trees, columnar ornamental pears. And now they're getting older, and they're all suffering from fire blight. So the whole landscape, we have to replace 10 trees.
Yeah.
So obviously we're looking at variety and some really cool things. But it's a shame when we look at that fantastic elegance of one single species.
Yeah.
And you get one problem moving in, kabam, she's all gone.
Yeah, for sure. And the ash trees, I know I'm in, the ash trees have been decimated, and my neighborhood, my whole street was all, I think there might be two maple trees on our street, and the rest were ash trees. Yeah. So between the borer and then because they were all weak and ill from the borer slowly killing them, and the ice storm from 4 or 5 years ago, it just decimated our street. So.
And in all fairness, we didn't treat them very well. We didn't give them good soil. We didn't give them a good start. There's one of my customers near here. They back onto what we call a vernal wetland, a spring wetland, and they have ash trees that are maybe 3 feet across in the trunk, and they're fine because they're happy there. It's their natural state. So the trees are happy. You got to remember, insects are like little wolves. They're going to go after the weak member of the herd. You mentioned birch trees and how people like birch trees, and they didn't know they liked them wet. It's a good thing there's no Society for the Protection of Animals for Plants. We put birch trees in the middle of the lawn, often raised up, and then we wonder why they die. But you got to put the right plant in the right place. You got to know where it grows in the wild and what its tolerances are.
Yes.
So if you're all just tuning in here as we pass the bottom of the hour, you are listening to Down the Garden Path here on Reality Radio 101. And tonight we are talking planting trees. And we're joined tonight by Sean James of Sean James Consulting and Designs. And we're taking a look at the Ontario Landscape Tree Planting Guide. So if you do have a question for Sean, a tree question, or just if you are familiar with Sean and want to talk with our guests, you can write us here at instudio101 at gmail.com. Again, instudio101 at gmail.com.
And we know we have listeners from all over the world. So just because it is the Ontario Tree Planting Guide, right, it isn't boundary bound, right, Sean?
No,
if you're in New York.
We're hoping this will become the global standard.
Yeah. So if you're in New York or you're in Winnipeg, I mean, it doesn't
California.
matter. California, I mean, it doesn't, although California might be a little different. I don't know what they're.
No, the basics are the same.
Okay.
Plant to the soil and plant it properly, and you're off to the races.
Excellent. And it's great to know, because that's the problem sometimes with the internet, is that you Google how to plant a tree and that list is going to be huge and very different. So the fact that this guide now has like you said, the latest research and, it's not just someone's opinion, it's actually the research and testing went into it. So, and you
Dr.
are saying.
McGrath at Vineland did a beautiful job on it. She led the whole thing, and it's just phenomenal.
Yeah, because Mark, when our arborist came in and talked about that he did say the same thing, that planting a young tree with very taproot or with bare root, the tree would do better and faster, and not to. He also said about not staking it as well. So he gave us some great advice.
That's fantastic.
During his last few visits, but so that's good to know that he also he's with Bartlett Trees, and they had done some research. Yeah, and they'd done extensive research as well. So it's always nice.
It's interesting the bare root thing. Often when you buy a plant, if it's pot grown, it's in a soilless mix, so organic matter all blended together, and that's a bit problematic. If you buy a plant that's field grown, it may not be the same as your soil. It might be a sandy loam. And so the tree goes through a bit of shock when it tries to get used to your soil. But if you do bare root, which is tough to do and it's tough to find, but don't be afraid of bare root trees if you have the opportunity to get them, because the roots have no soil on them. So there's none of that shock that they go through. You have to be a little more careful with keeping the roots moist and so on when you're getting it ready. But I used to do tree plantings for a local school, and I'd always get a bare root tree, and the kids were fascinated that could actually live, but it lives better.
Yeah. Now, with so one of the other popular dilemmas that I face with different landscapers is the good old wire basket, Sean, and the burlap that's around it. Is cutting the wire enough and bending it back? Is completely removing the cage? I'm sure that's all in the guide, but I'm wondering if you could give a.
What we want to do is remove the top once the root ball is in the hole and stable. Then we can remove the top third, because it holds it all together. Right. Once it's in the hole, then you can remove the top third of the wire basket. You don't need to remove the whole thing. Okay. And obviously take one of the big mistakes we make, we don't take that twine off from around the trunk. You have to take the twine off. Yeah. And then you take the burlap. You can cut it off if you really feel that's important, or you can just put it in the hole. But just cutting it off will do the job. You want to basically expose the top third of that root ball. And then again, I can't really stress enough to gently excavate down until you find where the trunk meets the roots. That's what you want to be able to see, is the root flare. Where the trunk, you look at it, you think of a tree in the forest, and where it meets the soil, it kind of flares out, and you can see the tops of the main roots.
Okay. I've been told that when you plant a tree, it shouldn't look like a telephone pole. right? Because I had an arborist
Very
because
good.
my tree, my blue spruce, 25 years ago was planted too deeply, and that when the arborist came to diagnose it, he said, if you compare your tree to the neighbor's tree, your tree looks like a telephone pole, and
That's
it's
brilliant.
isn't that brilliant? Like he's
Yeah.
right. Like you don't see the flare; it goes right to the ground. Compared to a properly planted tree where you do see that little, because when we all think about when you were in grade school and you drew a tree.
I was just thinking
I
that.
know,
I kid you not.
Right?
That's exactly
How did we
Yeah.
all draw the base of a tree?
with the flare on
the
it and the
flare.
little tops of the roots.
I know, and we didn't even know what we were doing, but
It's funny, we got it then, and
Yeah.
so many of us forget it when we actually become pros.
yeah, exactly. I think because that's the trees we've seen. Well, now we see them kind of hit or miss sometimes.
Knowing that they come, and I'm not being hard on the nurseries, but knowing that they come from the nurseries often too deep, just because of the nature of growing them. If you're putting a tree in a pot, it's natural to plant a little bit deeper so that you can put extra soil on there to hold it steady.
Right.
So we have to strip that away. And if it's in the field, just the process of plowing between the trees often ends up turning extra soil up around the root ball. So stripping that away, really, really important.
Okay, that's great, and I'm glad to know that I have been planting it correctly, and we've been peeling, removing the top, but definitely kind of cutting the top of the wire basket, and they often kind of peel it back.
Yeah.
Is that
I have
sufficient?
a pair of bolt cutters
Okay.
for cutting through the wire basket, but just the top third.
Right. What does the guide talk as well about any? I know you said not to amend, but is there? Oh my goodness, went right in my head. I'm thinking of root rescue, which is mycorrhizal, or what's the other thing that people put down? Oh my goodness.
Oh, Mike, MYKE.
Yeah, or even just a transplant fertilizer. Sorry. Phew.
Well, I wouldn't use transplant. I wouldn't use transplant fertilizer.
Okay.
Most of that stuff is like a Band-Aid. It makes us feel better. It doesn't help the tree. It's like tree paint. It doesn't do the tree any good whatsoever.
Yeah,
now,
Matt's giving you that
something
thumbs up there. Yeah.
Something like compost tea,
Ah.
that's better because it kickstarts that whole soil microbial process. All the creepy crawlies that live in the soil that are beneficial and not.
Okay.
Everybody together, the whole soil microbiome. Now, as far as the
Root rescue.
mycorrhizal amendments,
Yeah.
so the beneficial fungus. I was chatting recently with a lady that I'm a huge fan of, Dr. Linda Chalker Scott, and she is the head of horticultural outreach for Washington State, and she said something that really resonated with me, that fungal spores are in the air. It's not a pleasant thought, but you're breathing them in right now, all kinds of them, and of all different species. The spores are there. If you just make the environment right, then they will move in.
Okay.
And this is early days as far as all of this thing. I mean, even the mycorrhizal enhancements like Mike and Root Rescue are brand new. So I'm not ready to say that it's a good or bad thing.
Okay.
But certainly the important thing is to put the organic matter on top so that whole soil microbiome can get kick-started, especially if you're in a new subdivision where the soil is more or less dead because it's been piled very high.
Right.
As you mentioned, I'm a master gardener, and it's interesting the debates that we get into. There was a gentleman who was saying soil is not alive.
Ooh.
In the same sense that you are only a human.
Yeah.
If I took all the bacteria and fungi out of you,
Yeah.
you wouldn't be very healthy very long.
Right.
We need to think of the soil, I believe, as from a holistic standpoint.
Yeah.
So giving that a good rich compost. Dr. Chalker Scott, you can find her as the Garden Professor's blog on Facebook and just the blog itself. She believes that if you even just use arborist mulch, like the chips that arborists produce,
Okay.
putting that on the surface of the soil, that's going to give the home for all those fungi and so on to live in and then radiate down into the soil and outwards. I use composted pine mulch myself,
Yep.
which I love,
Right.
and it's sort of pre-inoculated with all the goodies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's my favorite as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I have used. I mean, I've been inconsistent. I would say this season with the root rescue. But last year I was very consistent. I have another friend who's a designer, and because especially when we're warranting the trees, right? We want to do everything.
Gives them a good kickstart.
Yeah.
I think that's undeniable.
Yeah. So yeah, we just need to get. We want them to survive, but sometimes, Sean, you want to just get them past their warranty period. Sometimes, right?
Yeah. A lot of it is just the right aftercare because people
right.
forget they're all gung ho at the beginning, and even I'm not just talking about citizens. I'm talking about landscapers too.
Right.
And then we kind of we get busy with other things, remembering for that first entire year to really look after the plant is important. You see people go to box store A and buy cedar trees, and they've got this itty bitty root ball, and a lot of them die. They don't have to die if you give them the suitable care.
Right. Yeah, that's
super important.
Yeah, that's very important.
And sure. I build it into my contracts that I go and wrap the trees for the first winter.
Okay.
The evergreens.
Right.
To help cut the moisture loss from the wind.
Okay.
And then I leave it to the customer to take all that burlap off in the spring.
Okay.
And that gives them a good kickstart. So it's especially important with the more sensitive things like white pine and say hemlocks and firs.
Okay.
That's very important.
Okay.
Cedars tend to be a little more tolerant, but it's still a good idea especially with evergreens.
Right. Now, are you wrapping the evergreens tight, or are you doing similar to like a Japanese maple where you're kind of staking the perimeter and then wrapping the stake with burlap?
I'd say it's a middle ground, actually,
okay.
Come to think of it. I buy big rolls of burlap, and then I go around the tree tough enough that it's going to hold through the winter. If with an evergreen, if you wrap it too loosely, the wind can whip at it and zip it around, and then it slowly loosens it. So I wrap it tight enough, probably twice, that the wind won't have anywhere to grab onto. And then I buy the cheapest, crummiest nails that I can buy, and I sort of weave them through the edges to hold it all together. And they rust up really quick, and that rust holds it together.
Okay, that's your secret.
That's a good way of doing it, actually. You think about it. It's cool, Sean.
Well, all the listeners here on Down the Garden Path know how much Joanne hates burlap.
I do, yeah.
So, Sean, she's listening to you, and she's saying, oh, those are good tips and tricks. but she's never going to do it.
Gary, I've done the show for 5 years with Gary, so he knows how I feel about burlap. But I do know that the first year, I'm not saying every year. Right?
Oh, gosh, no. What's the point of planting an evergreen if you're going to wrap it every winter?
Yeah. Right. Exactly, Gary. See?
We're on the same page.
Yeah.
I apologize.
If it's a formal evergreen,
yes,
I might shear it in October to get rid of the fluffy bits, the stuff that the snow would pull open.
Okay.
But I certainly wouldn't wrap something just as a matter of habit.
Right.
That just defeats the whole purpose of having an evergreen to plant a deciduous tree.
Yes, for sure. For sure. So definitely, it's the people that have like the 15-year-old, cedar hedge and they're wrapping it, and or cedar, pyramidal cedars by their front door or something like that, and they wrap them every winter. And then the people,
junipers.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And then who's now there? I noticed Matthew works at a garden center, and they're making burlap printed with like prints on it. Yeah. It's like to encourage people, like now they're not Christmas trees that we're wrapping, like Christmas gifts, right?
Yeah, I've seen it.
Yeah.
It's cute. It's clever.
Yeah.
I think it's generally good. If you had a special rhododendron,
yes,
that I love plants. I like I said, I love my natives, but I love all plants.
Yeah.
So I'll buy something that's a bit sketchy. I've tried to grow the hardy palm. I've tried to grow the hardy banana, and failed. But I might have a special thing that I might be a little more cautious with.
Right.
But I'm not going to build my landscape around those.
Right.
A lot of people try and grow the hydrangeas that are a little bit more tender, and maybe you might want to put some stakes around and fill them up with mulched up leaves or something like that. But I'm just too lazy.
Yes.
Efficient. Sorry. Efficient.
Yeah, efficient. No.
I've got other things to do.
That's right. We're realistic. Yes.
Yeah, that's better. Realistic.
Yes, realistic.
Like
for sure. So that's good to know. Okay, so it's, in a way, this information has made it easier, right? We don't have to worry about having triple mix. We don't have to worry about having a tons of different amendments.
Yeah.
My last thing that I'm thinking about, my situation that I think about is if it's a brand new, so there is no existing soil. Let's say it's a brand new install, beside a pool, all the old soil's gone. They scrape the gravel away, throw in some triple mix, and then expect me to plant a tree.
Well,
right?
it depends on how well or poorly they do creating the environment around it.
Yes.
I was out visiting a friend of mine on the weekend out in Belleville in a new subdivision, and what they dug out of the house, they put around the house and leveled it out.
Yeah.
And we were having a big debate about this particular thing, and I was counseling using just bulletproof things like bur oak, hickories, hybrid elms, hackberry, which, by the way, supports a really cool butterfly. It's called the snout butterfly.
Ah.
So that, I look at the big picture, the diversity, the biodiversity that you get from it. So I, even in those situations, and I mean, now we're getting really controversial, but I'm going to plant the plant that can live anywhere.
Okay.
The plant that can live in a parking lot at the mall. Things like Freeman maples, that small thermonuclear bursts don't hurt. It's something that is just absolutely bulletproof.
Okay.
If you were going to, now I'm going to reference back to Linda Chalker Scott here. She says if the soil is new, like almost like subsoil, subdivision soil, then tilling in, because there's nothing to hurt. We don't want to till the soil anymore because it breaks up the soil microbiome, the beneficial fungi and such. But she recommends tilling in wood chips, the stuff that they want to throw away, the stuff that they do when they clear the hydro lines.
Oh, okay.
Because it's got lots of surface on it, and that surface becomes sort of a condominium for beneficial everythings.
Okay. Well, that's good to
And
know.
Linda pushes my envelopes frequently
Mm-hmm.
because she's all about science. If it's not science, get out of here.
Right.
But
Okay.
I have found so far every time, even though this makes me uncomfortable,
Yeah.
that she's right.
Okay.
And people want more information too. There's always the Master Gardener of Ontario Facebook page.
Okay.
So anybody can go in and join. And it's going to ask you a question. Why do you want to join the Master Gardener Facebook page? Answer the question so that we know you're not a robot. So we know
I
you're someone
see.
real.
Okay.
And you can go there and ask questions. You can go there and just get information from other people's questions.
Mm-hmm.
We live in a wonderful age where, the people who are interested in gardening but aren't professionals can approach someone like you or me
That's
or the
right.
Master Gardeners
Mhm.
on Facebook, on Twitter, and get real information. Like Twitter, I find brand new scientific papers popping up all the time.
Mm-hmm.
The real jazz. So,
Yeah.
we have this great opportunity. Dr. Ellen Armitage, great people.
Yes.
And we're accessible
Mm-hmm.
now.
Yes, exactly. Oh, that is wonderful. This has been a great topic, and I hope everybody does take advantage of looking up. So where is the best way? Do you have the email address handy for the Ontario Tree Planting Guide?
You don't need an email address. Just,
Okay.
just search Ontario Landscape Tree Planting Guide.
Okay.
It's on the Vineland Research and Innovation website. It's on the Landscape Ontario website. But if you just search
It'll come.
Ontario Landscape Tree Planting Guide,
Okay.
then you'll find it online.
Excellent. Excellent.
I
And
tell my students, I teach for Mohawk, and I tell my students that your cell phone or your iPad or whatever is the modern equivalent of the Library of Alexandria. All of the
That's right.
information is there. If you know the
Yes.
right questions to ask.
That's right. And we have a listener, Ari, has written in saying, fantastic show tonight. Great information. Does Sean have a website? Thanks.
Thank you, Ari. I'm at www.seanjames-consulting.ca.
Excellent.
And you can also find me as sean.james.12 on Facebook and at Sean James Designs on Instagram. and I'm on Twitter as well. I'm all over the place.
Yes.
But that's all. You can find me, and I got newsletters and the whole jazz on my webpage. I'm all about, as are you, I'm all about education. The more we share information, the stronger we all get.
For sure. And I know Sean has spoken at our Horticultural Society. And you speak I follow you every week. I'm like, I don't know how you get any designs done, Sean, because you are speaking all the time.
I print time. I have a time printing machine.
There you go. That's perfect. And I know I know my colleague at the Pickering Hort has reached out to you as well for a date in 2020. So we're trying to book you for 2020.
I love public speaking. The opportunity to go to any group, master gardeners, garden clubs, community service groups, nature groups, and talk gives you the chance to get information out there. I've got a talk on soils. I've got a fun talk called What We Used to Kill, Caterpillars and Their Host Plants, rain gardens, fusion gardens, which we've chatted about, you and I, where you're mixing rain gardening with drought-tolerant gardening. Really amazing things.
Yes. Yeah. Your topics are really inspiring. So I'm really glad that we got you on this show. And I know we've spoken in the past. I have to go back in the archives and kind of, because I know it was before Matthew's time.
Well, that whole list of my talks is actually on my website under the Educate page too.
Wonderful.
And I've got a newsletter that folks can sign up for there as well.
Okay, great. So a newsletter. So I hope everybody takes advantage of that. And even following Sean, it's exciting to see where you're speaking and the different and what you're working on too. I feel like I'm like a fly in the room where I get to see what you're working on, which is always exciting.
I tried to do some Facebook Live videos. We did one today for a really cool rain garden native planting that we're doing in Oakville, and we kind of walked around and talked about everything that we were doing there. Friends finally got me to get a gimbal, which stabilizes my videos so the people watching don't get all seasick.
Well, that's good to know too. Excellent. Well, we're really excited that you were able to speak to this, and I think it is because everybody wants to know how to plant a tree. I'm going to leave you with one last question. I had a question about small trees.
Okay.
Do you have like a couple of favorite things that are going to be maybe more ornamental or smaller trees?
Goodness, yes. Well, my favorite would be, it goes by a few different common names, Indian raisin or nannyberry. That's a small tree that's got white flowers for the pollinators in the spring. It's got delicious fruit if you get to them before the birds do. And it's got beautiful sort of plum red fall color. That's one of my favorites. I'm a big fan of columnar trees, like columnar red maple. And red maples are great, by the way, A, because they're smaller, but B, because they have flowers super early, little red, beautiful flowers that the native bees go gaga over. That's a really good plant as well. So those would certainly be two of my favorites right off the bat. I tend to overwhelm people with information because I'm so enthusiastic, but let's just keep it simple. And nanny berries are fantastic, and some of the narrow cultivars of red maple, like Armstrong, are really good as well.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for that. Because yes, I tend to overwhelm guests too with all these questions. So I thank you for being patient. Thank you for joining us. And
the opportunity to get the word out is wonderful. Thank you.
You're welcome. So we will talk soon.
I look forward.
Okay. Thanks, Sean.
Thanks, Sean.
Bye-bye.
So great. So there you have it. So we've got a place, no matter where you're listening or where you're listening to us live, or if you're listening later on the podcast, you have a reference guide that contains a lot of research, a lot of huge team effort. So it's not just one person's opinion. And on the latest science on the best practices to plant trees. And I'm excited about the diagrams.
Oh, and I was just going to say, it's absolutely beautifully illustrated. Lots of diagrams. The science all comes with different diagrams and ways of expressing it visually. So, I mean, you can get really right into it, and it's an enjoyable read. It's only 100 pages. Only,
but it's a free download. So, yes, you can. That's a lot of pages to download, but it is a reference. I was able to pull it up on my phone.
I just literally, just like Sean said, just search Ontario Landscape Tree Planting Guide or Tree Planting Guide Ontario, and it's up immediately. There's so many sites that are carrying it right now. It's fantastic. Definitely worth a read. Excellent.
So we hope everybody would love to hear your feedback after you take a look. We'd love to hear, feedback. You can reach out to us at Joanne at downtoearth.ca with the number 2. That's my email, or any of my social media of my website, downtoearth.ca.
That's right. And you can find me at Matthew at naturalaffinitydesigns.ca. And if you're listening live, you can always reach us here at In Studio 101. And if you're not listening live, perhaps we're on your podcast podcast right now during your drive, whenever.
Yes.
You can always reach us at those emails as well. So don't forget to write out to us at any time during the week, whether we're here or not.
Yes.
We love to hear from you.
Excellent. We do. And we do want to, I do want to spend a minute just to say that as our season's winding down,
Yes.
But we're both landscape designers, and we still can design.
Yeah.
So the season might be getting too cold you might not want to be planting anything necessarily, but if you're thinking about anything for next year, now is a perfect time to start planning. So regardless of where you are, we can also do off-site, sending measurements and photos, less than ideal, but we can still do that. If you want to work with us on a design, we can do that. Or if you are in the GTA and want a consultation, we forget to tell people that we actually do, in addition to doing the radio show, we actually will love to help you with your gardens, right? And landscapes.
Yes. So please contact us. Let us help you and inspire us as well.
That's right.
We love seeing what everyone up is against. We've all got our own unique environments, and we love being a part of that and sharing that with you. So.
We do. And we just love that people think ahead, right? Yes. Because we know that contractors are booking. They're already booking into May and June next year, and it's not even November yet. And we know we all get those calls in February where people are super keen on that first warm weekend in February because they want their landscape done first. But unfortunately, by February, you're not first for 2020. So there is always that I don't know if it's a lag, or I don't know if that there's always that little bit of a overlap, I guess.
Yeah.
So we like to remind everybody about that. And also, since designs until the snow flies, as long as we can see the ground and we can measure,
we're good to go.
We're good to go. Yeah. So we're good to go. So, and with this day and age, with photographs and Google Maps and things like that, we can design over the internet kind of, like never before, really.
If you're in Missouri and you want us to design your yard, we are open to you.
That's right.
Give us a shout.
Yes, exactly. So we want to thank you. You're good? Yeah, we didn't get a chance to chat, but
I'm good.
You're good.
I'm good. Sorry for being late, everyone.
No, they didn't even know.
They didn't even know. But thank you for tuning in. Thank you, Ruth, Tom, Alice, and Ari for writing in. Thanks, Gary, for producing the show. Thank you, everyone, for spending your Monday nights with us here on Down the Garden Path. Thank you, Joanne. We'll see you all next week.
We will. We'll see you next week.
With November in the Garden. Thanks for tuning in to Down the Garden Path.
That's right. November in the Garden, everybody.
Here on Reality Radio 101.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to Down the Garden Path with your host, Joanne Shaw and Matthew Dressing, right here on Reality Radio 101.